On November 26, 1941, a massive Japanese naval force quietly departed from its home waters. The fleet, consisting of 6 aircraft carriers, 2 battleships, and hundreds of aircraft, set course for a secret assembly point 230 miles north of Oahu, Hawaii. Their target, the United States Pacific Fleet anchored at Pearl Harbor. The attack, scheduled for December 7th, aimed to achieve tactical surprise, paralyze American naval power, and claim thousands of lives. However, this bold strike ultimately altered the course of World War II and led to Imperial Japan's eventual defeat. To understand this pivotal moment, we must examine the events of the 1930s that set these wheels in motion. Throughout the early 20th century, Japan underwent rapid modernization in both its economy and military. The nation's leadership envisioned building an empire to rival those of Great Britain and the United States, one that would secure vital trade routes and access to crucial natural resources. However, Japan faced a significant obstacle. Its home islands lacked the raw materials needed to fuel such expansion. In 1931, Japan took its first major step toward empire building by invading Manchuria, a resource-rich Chinese province. This conquest provided Japan with essential materials and a foothold for further expansion into Asia. By July 1937, tensions escalated into a full-scale war with China. Initially, Japanese forces achieved numerous victories, though their campaign was marked by widespread atrocities, including the rape of Nanking and civilian bombing campaigns that drew international condemnation. By 1939, the war in China had reached a stalemate, draining Japanese resources and manpower. Japan faced a critical decision between 2 strategic paths. The northern strategy, favored by the army, involved expanding into resource-rich regions of China, Mongolia, and Siberia. The southern strategy, championed by the Navy, proposed expansion into British Malaya and the Dutch East Indies, areas rich in oil and rubber. The northern strategy suffered a significant setback when Soviet-Mongolian forces defeated Japan at the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. This defeat, combined with the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact of 1939, forced Japan to pivot southward. While these events unfolded, the United States watched with growing concern. Although America had maintained a policy of non-interventionism throughout the 1930s, Japanese aggression and the outbreak of war in Europe gradually shifted public opinion. By 1939, President Franklin D. Roosevelt secured approval to supply arms to Britain and France, later extending this support to China and the Soviet Union through the Lend-Lease program. Japan's occupation of French Indochina in 1940 marked a turning point. The United States responded with trade restrictions on essential materials like iron, steel, and copper. When Japan expanded its occupation in July 1941, the response was even more severe. America froze Japanese assets and imposed an oil embargo, quickly followed by similar actions from Britain and the Netherlands. This cut off 94% of Japan's oil supply. Faced with this crisis, Japanese leaders attempted negotiations with the United States. However, American demands for Japan's withdrawal from China and the Tripartite Pact were seen as tantamount to surrender. Unwilling to abandon their imperial ambitions, Japanese military planners concluded that their only option was to seize the resources they needed by force. Japanese strategists believed that expanding into British Malaya and the Dutch East Indies would inevitably draw American military intervention. Their solution was to launch a preemptive strike against the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, hoping to buy time to secure and fortify their new territories. They gambled that America would lack the resolve to wage a lengthy war across the Pacific and would instead negotiate a peace settlement. At 7:55 a.m. on December 7, 1941, the first wave of 183 Japanese aircraft appeared over Pearl Harbor. The attack was precisely planned. Fighters and dive bombers targeted airfield facilities, while torpedo bombers struck at the heart of America's naval power. The battleships anchored in the harbor. The Japanese had developed specialized torpedoes for Pearl Harbor's shallow waters, achieving devastating results. The second wave arrived at 8:54 a.m., though it faced stiffer resistance. In just over an hour, the Japanese had sunk or damaged 18 American warships, including all 8 battleships, and destroyed 188 aircraft. However, they overlooked crucial strategic targets like fuel depots and repair facilities. Most significantly, all 3 American aircraft carriers were absent during the attack. Japan's initial success was dramatic. Simultaneous attacks throughout the Pacific secured rapid victories. Thailand quickly surrendered and allied with Japan, while American and British territories fell in rapid succession. By early 1942, Japan had built its empire and obtained the vital resources it desperately needed. However, the attack on Pearl Harbor had precisely the opposite effect of what Japan had intended. Rather than forcing America to negotiate, it unified the nation behind President Roosevelt's declaration of war. The United States rapidly mobilized its vast industrial capacity and manpower for total war, abandoning all pretense of isolationism. Japan's dream of a short, decisive conflict evaporated as it found itself locked in a prolonged war with an awakened industrial giant, a war it was ultimately destined to lose.